From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
This is Chad.
You've got a tip for Melissa. The clue that changes everything in a murder investigation. A theory on an open case that no one's thought of. A pizza recipe, so long as it doesn't involve pineapple. Anything. Tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837. Or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host. She's missing an important playoff game to be here because she couldn't care less about sports. Melissa Morgan!
More cowbell. I got so scared for a minute, I thought you had confused me with another podcast host. I was like, I don't know about a playoff
Chad.
game. I'm sorry. So there were...
I try to be so,
professional
at the top.
You are.
Yeah.
But it's fun. I mean, I never know what you're going to say in your intro. You never, it's just fun to trip each other up. And I saw on the wonderful social media that there was a list of appropriate greetings every time you pick up your phone. So I just thought, this is Chad was funny. So I'm glad I made you laugh. And I'm not really Chad.
Did.
My name is Melissa. And I'm missing all the playoffs, all the baseball, basketball, football, squash, Australian rules football.
Only playoffs going on right now are basketball and
I don't
hockey.
care. I don't care. I'm not listening. So exciting news. September of 2018, Just the Tip-Sters was the number 14th most popular podcast in the Bahamas.
Awesome.
There are probably 14 people in the Bahamas, and we were number 14, and now we're number 386, I think. I don't remember. But it was just funny. There's a service that sends you the ratings of your podcast and how it is on all of the charts across the universe. And it was, past dated, but I was like, oh my God, in September of last year, we were number 14 in the Bahamas.
Yeah, I didn't even know about that. I'm the producer. I'm supposed to get that stuff.
Oh, yeah. No, you have other things to do. I spend all my time, is anyone listening?
Yeah.
Hello? Is this thing a hello?
Hey, wait, could this be housekeeping?
It's very housekeeping. Yeah.
Housekeeping.
We've done housekeeping several weeks in a row, and you've forgotten your drop, and I didn't want to say anything.
Well, I know
because I don't give you the heads up, and I apologize. That's my fault. Thank you for playing the housekeeping drop because it will make me laugh every single time. This podcast, as far as I know, I speak English, and it has, I think it's 35 different countries or nations now, something like that, in the 30s. So, those countries that were English speaking that were in the top, the United States was always going to have the most number of listeners. And then there was the United Kingdom, Canada, and then Australia. And it has, the tables have turned. My UK and Canadian brethren have been like, fuck you, Melissa, as Australia has zoomed up the charts. So Australia is second now to the United States as far as listenership to this podcast. And I'm thrilled to death. So with that piece of information, the third episode of this month of May will be a case from Australia. So
you're rewarding nations that listen to us.
Yes.
Yes.
So I can hardly wait for the Uzbekistan episode.
I'm sure there have been...
Kyrgyzstan.
Yes, I'm sure there have been murders in Kurdistan.
Murders with the Stan.
Although I do think that probably... I don't think the other listeners are saying, fuck you, Melissa.
Oh, no, they're not. It's just how I feel. I'm very, very thin-skinned and overly sensitive. So if, their listenership is lowered... or not as fast moving as Australia just zoomed up the charts recently, I assume it's a personal affront to me. And it's not. It's just how I am. I'm very, like I said, I'm very thin-skinned and overly sensitive. And the other piece of Housekeeping is we are getting in some magnificent swag. And we have these awesome new baseball hats that I am delighted with the quality because, you sometimes order things to either be printed or embroidered and you're like, oh shit, who did that?
Yeah, there's been some trial and error on the swag.
Yeah. So I was very delighted with the quality of these hats. They are embroidered. The logo is embroidered, and it's not, the new logo isn't a real clear-cut, easy thing to do. They made the blood spatter behind the skull wearing headphones really well done. It's just very well done. So that's just part of the new swag, and we will figure out where that will land on the levels for Patreon.
Well, speaking of that, I have a suggestion, and I think I'm going to announce it here. But look, we want to remind everybody that we have become partners with Patreon, and Patreon is a way, if you don't know, for you to become a patron of the podcast and help us out paying a few of our bills. And just kind of showing your support. And it doesn't really cost much at all. And I'm going to go through what you can do here really quick so you can, hopefully go and visit patreon.com/justthetipsters and become a patron. There are 4 tiers. First tier is basic bishes. I've never heard the term before, but I knew Melissa. But you bishes out there who want to be basic, For just $2 a month, $2 to $4 per month, your choice. You get Just the Tip-Sters stickers and magnets to put on your refrigerator or stick on as a bumper sticker or anywhere you want. And that's for $2 to $4 a month. For $5 to $9 per month, you get the magnets and the stickers. Plus, you get your choice of a Just the Tip-Sters tumbler or a Just the Tip-Sters water bottle, which is very cool. And if you go to Tier 3, that's the true Tip-Sters level, for $10 to $19 per month, you get the stickers and magnets, you get the tumbler or the water bottle, and you get a really cool Just the Tip-Sters mesh travel bag. It's black with the logo on it, and it's really, Melissa did a great job of finding these. I didn't know you could even find them. And then finally, if you want to be a superstar and really help us out, the Tier 4 is Tipster Unicorns. And that's if you want to put in $20 or more per month, you get the stickers and the magnets, you get your choice of the travel bag, the tumbler or the water bottle, and you get your choice of either the Just the Tip-Sters full-size canvas tote, which is really full-size and it's really well-made, or a Just the Tip-Sters t-shirt, which we have in all sizes, but supplies are limited, and I think here's where you tell me if you disagree with this, Melissa. I think we give them a choice of the baseball cap if they want that.
I think that's a great plan because we just got the caps in yesterday, the baseball caps, and they are stellar.
Yeah, they look great. So all you need to do one more time is you go to Patreon, patreon.com/Just the Tipsters, and then choose a level 1, 2, 3, or 4. Choose a tier 1, 2, 3, or 4, and then the folks at Patreon will send us an email telling us you subscribed, and we will contact you and find out which of the swag you want to get.
Yeah, you can personalize your swag selection. And we really need to send a special shout out to our first patron on Patreon, which is Tipster Lois, who, just broke the mold and came right in at the highest level.
She's a unicorn.
She has always been a unicorn, but she is now a Tipster unicorn. So we are very grateful to Tipster Lois for that. So this episode was, I feel a little ignorant because I like to think I know, all the shit in the world about true crime. And sometimes it's easy to mesh real life and fiction. And I was under the impression that Fargo, I thought the more theatrical parts of the film were from the minds of the Cohen brothers. I thought, the wood chipper scene with Steve Buscemi and Peter Stormare was absolutely from their the recesses of their fascinating, twisted, fucked up, creative, genius, brilliant, weirdo minds, having no clue that it actually came from, ripped straight from the headlines. And I feel really ignorant that I was unfamiliar with this story. And if I had heard it, I would have thought the person got the inspiration from the film. And no, Tip-Sters, the film got the inspiration from him. So it's very interesting to me that someone who is married, has children, has many careers, I'm going to say it that way, comes up with this plan to off a spouse. So we're going to start at the beginning. Helle Nielsen is an only child born in July of 1947 in Denmark. She is a vibrant, outgoing, brilliant child, and she graduates early. She learns many languages. She speaks French and English, and she's also able to understand German as well as, speaking Norwegian and Swedish. So she ends up going to college in England, and she, again, graduates early, and she ends up becoming an au pair in France. So she's 20, and she's already this brilliant, accomplished, beautiful young girl. So she is still living in France, and she gets a job as a flight attendant for Capital Airways. And she flew to Africa many times out of Brussels or out of Frankfurt, and just really loved that lifestyle. So when she hears that Pan Am is looking for stewardesses in the flight attendants in the Copenhagen area.
It's okay to say stewardesses.
Well, we're talking about, in the past, but I'm trying so hard to.
Please, you don't.
Flight attendant.
There you go.
Okay, so she's applying as a flight attendant for Pan Am in Copenhagen, and she's such a remarkable girl that she's one of only 8 candidates out of a group of 200 that was sent to Miami for training courses. And because she had worked for Capital Airways, she, already had a lot of, of the experience. So it wasn't difficult for her to finish first in her class. She's really that person. She's always excelling at anything she attempts to do. She excels. She's amazing. So she lives in Miami at a small motel that's near the airport. And that's where I guess a lot of the airline employees lived. And, flight attendants, they're all living under the same roof with male coworkers, with pilots. That's where you stay between your flights. And her friends were like, look, she was very cautious, and she wasn't promiscuous, but she also, wasn't stupid and enjoyed the company of pilots. A lot of the flight attendants were like, these could be future husbands, or they could just be my fun fuck buddy while I'm on a layover. Sorry.
Isn't that one of those scholastic books for kindergartners? My Fun Fuck Buddy?
My Fun Fuck Buddy on my layover. Yes, that's it. It's Dick and Jane. And thank you so much for that, Producer Mark. Your input is invaluable. So in May of 1969, Helle is waiting at the motel for a flight. And she's, knows she's going to be going to work. And she meets Richard Crafts. And now he's quite a bit older than her. He's 31. I think she's like 21 at the time. He's 9 to 10 years older than her, depending on the time of year. Their birthdays were a little bit of a crossover. So she meets Richard Crafts, who's 31, and he's different. He's a disgustingly interesting human being. So he was really extravagant, telling about his stories. He said that he, had worked for the CIA and had done like combat missions in Indochina. And I was like, okay. And at first when you meet someone and you're a young girl and he's an older established man, you're like, all right, maybe. And some of the people that knew him bought the stories, but a lot of people were like, that's just Richard and blah, blah, blah in his big mouth. So he, grew up in a pretty well-established home. His father was a very successful businessman in Manhattan, but he always wanted to live in the suburbs. So he buys a house in Darien, Connecticut. So all of the areas that Richard grew up in and lives in as an adult, all of these areas are very nice parts of Connecticut. You're going to recognize a lot of the names. So he grows up in Darien. He went to a private school, but he didn't do very well. So they ask him to instead transfer to the public school. So he graduates from Darien High School, just like, here's your diploma, please leave. Don't come back. He went to college, but just for a short time, he dropped out. And then finally, he joins the Marines in 1956. So in the Marines, he finds some peace of mind in that he gravitates toward aviation, and he starts flying helicopters. He trains on fixed wing aircraft. He's a pilot, by the time it's the late 50s. And in 58, he is transferred with the Marines to Korea and then Japan. So while he was there, he did fly planes for Air America, which is an organization that, is sort of a branch of the CIA. So he liked to take that information and make it seem like he
expanded a little.
Yeah. Yes, that's a good word. I like expanded. So he ends up returning to the United States in 1966. So he kind of bums around for a couple of years. He really can't find work. But then in 1968, he finally gets a job as a pilot with Eastern Airlines. And that's in the 60s. That's a really big airline. It's very big and busy. In fact, in the 60s, it was America's largest airline. It was very busy. So he's making a good living. And he, meets Helle in 1969 in Miami. And he was already engaged to someone else. So it's the wild, swinging late 60s. And, Helle is like, okay, I don't care if you're engaged. We're going to, have fun or we're not. I don't care. So he is engaged. He is seeing her and he's seeing other people. And she's just really not putting a lot into it. He might have had like a wart on the end of his tongue. And it was forked or something. I don't know. Or maybe his penis bent to the left. I'm not really sure. But he had something going on that, it was off and on for a couple of years, actually. And he eventually breaks up with his fiance. They would fight a lot, sometimes even in public. But they would somehow always end up gravitating back together. And her friends, Helle's friends, are like, you can have anyone. Why are you with him? But it was something she said she really couldn't control. She was just really, attracted to him and ended up coming back to him, back off and on. And then in 1975, she ends up being pregnant. So later that year, they get married in New Hampshire. So Richard Crafts buys a beautiful one-level ranch house in Newtown, Connecticut in 1976. And she has her first child, and then she has 2 more kids. So they have 3 kids altogether. After she has the 3rd kid, she goes back to her job as a flight attendant, and she hires an au pair because she had been an au pair and she knew they were important. So they hire Dawn Thomas, who's only 19 at the time. But, she is a wonderful au pair and is with the family.
Uh-oh.
No. She's wonderful.
Okay.
And integral. And Richard was smart enough not to dip the pen in the company family inkwell. He fucked around outside.
Ah, okay.
Oh, sorry, I already let that out. He is a fucker. Yeah, so he didn't have an affair with Dawn, and I think she remained staunchly loyal to Helle and the kids. That was her main focus. She really does sound like an amazing person, and she provides some information later that strings up old left-leaning dick monster. So, or forked tongue wart man. I don't know what. I can't imagine what.
That's
anyway,
another one of those scholastic books, right?
wart on the end of his tongue.
No, forked tongue dick man.
The
adventures of.
I feel like you and I had different experiences in elementary school. I was never made privy to forked tongue dick man. a little golden book. No, I really
a little golden book.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking of.
Well, no,
With
Scholastic is good too. I never
little
was
cartoon drawings on the front.
Yeah. I was never exposed to those. Mine were, I feel, so much more boring. So, besides aviation, he has and lots of women, which he can, obviously, you're a pilot, you can, fuck around the world in different ports with your dick that's pointing to the left. And he also has another love of his life, which is collecting guns. He's nutty. I mean, he, had an arsenal of weapons before he met Helle. And after, they have a house, he's got lots of space to, store his collection. So he's got literally dozens of handguns, including but not limited to 9mm automatics, 44 caliber revolvers, 357 magnums. He's got high-powered rifles. He's got semi-automatic weapons. He's got crossbows and hand grenades.
Is it okay for me to say uh-oh now?
You can, and it applies, except we don't even know that he used any of those things. Probably didn't. He also has, thousands of rounds of ammunition. So the police later on describe it as being enough to arm 50 men, which is funny. And not so funny, but funny. So he spends hours cleaning, polishing, arranging his armory. He's a little nutty. And any time that there is a gun show within driving distance of his Connecticut home, especially he seemed to really like the ones in New Jersey, he would go. He would be there spending hours, looking at everything and spending a lot of money to expand, his armament. So he has this huge, crazy-ass collection of guns. So in the meantime, Helle is working and he is working, and he also has a side job.
Uh-oh.
He is an auxiliary police officer.
Oh, you're kidding.
I am not.
Okay.
I am not. He is a pilot who makes a very good living. In the late 70s, early 80s, he was in the top 5% of the income earned. And he is an auxiliary officer for $7 an hour.
With the local police force?
There's two different cities, which I'll get to, where he had worked. One, he worked as a volunteer. And the other, he is hired. I believe it's Southbury. He's hired for $7 an hour.
It could not be that his left-leaning dick gets really hard when he gets to carry a gun.
I don't know. That I don't own one of those, so maybe you...
Well, it sounds like he collects a lot of guns, and this is a great opportunity for him to carry one legally and potentially shoot somebody.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that as an auxiliary officer you get a gun, but he later on purchases at his own cost a Crown Victoria, which is the car they used, and outfits it with antennas and, radar and radios and all the things that, and trained on how to use all this at his own cost because they don't provide that. I think they basically wanted him to go around like Gladys Kravitz and go, Bob Smith has his garbage can too close to the road or something.
Yeah, and then a Crown Vic goes by with all this stuff sticking out of it. It would scare the shit out of it. Yeah, right.
And start shooting. Sorry, that was my...
Can you make that sound again?
It was dow 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 dow. That was the one you said as a child, right? I don't know what guns sound like.
They don't sound like that.
All right. No, look, no one said I'm Michael Winslow. I don't know how to make mouth noises, so fuck off.
Right.
Anyway, may I please get back to the episode?
Oh, sorry,
Thank you so much.
Please go on.
So this marriage is really, it's suffering, and I can't imagine why. And Helle is he's got more fascination for guns than he ever did for me. And in the meantime, Helle is appearing in public with bruises on her face. She would never say anything, but her friends later on told the police, he hit her, and we really wanted her to leave him. She did say that she would never forgive him for what he put her through during her first pregnancy. So he didn't want kids. I'm not sure why she wanted to have kids with him. Again, it could be forked tongue. I don't know. But she had 3 kids with him, and he treated her so badly during each pregnancy. After each one of the kids was born, he would disappear. He would
go disappear?
Yeah, he would pack a bag and leave. and for like days and sometimes weeks at a time. And this, we're talking, in the 80s where nobody has a cell phone. So she was like, I don't know I don't know if he was working. I don't know if he had flights. I don't know where he went. He never told me. And he would either come back or he wouldn't, but he came back. So while he was gone, because he was so controlling, he's the one who paid all the bills. And she had to figure out how to pay household expenses, while he was gone. And she, couldn't get into everything. And it was really, and here she was, trying to take care of a new baby.
Wow.
He was really bizarre. And he would buy odd things like landscaping equipment, big tractors, mowers. He paid $25,000 for a backhoe, which was never used. Never used.
A backhoe?
A backhoe.
I mean, I don't care how big your backyard is. You don't need a backhoe.
You don't need to pay for it. If you need to dig out a pool, rent one. So yeah, he pays $25,000, in the 80s for a backhoe. And his neighbors were starting to be like, this isn't going great. His front yard was like a, Fred Sanford lot for rusting, broken equipment. His neighbors are like, this is an eyesore, and they're constantly reporting him. So maybe that's why he decided to join the auxiliary police. So it's 1982. And even though he's, a pilot with Eastern, he is, and his house looks like it's just falling down, except he has huge pieces of equipment that's rusting. He becomes an auxiliary police officer in Newtown. So this is where he's volunteer. And he doesn't get paid, but he takes this very seriously. Again, I think narcissist alert. He hangs out at the police station, and even when he wasn't supposed to be on duty, quote unquote, and he would sometimes respond to police calls without being authorized to just show up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah. Okay.
4 years after that, he's finally hired as a real police officer in Southbury, and he gets $7 an hour, which is, a little bit less than you get paid as a pilot. And
a little bit
less. And he pays for this very expensive, training, all these seminars that give instructions on police procedures. And he, buys the 85 Ford Crown Vic, and he, it's the same car that the Connecticut State Police use. And he totally outfits it at his own cost with, all this, even like lights and a siren, not just radios and antennas and radar.
Hey man,
lights.
even when you're off duty, man, you gotta be ready.
So weird.
Yeah, he was nuts.
I'm
sorry. Now we know for sure he's nuts.
Well, if one were to think about it, the years starting in the 60s of collecting guns, of wanting to know police procedures, of buying large equipment. If you look back at this, it looks like he, was training to be a serial killer. I mean,
one could argue
it's a lot of things that add up to not, there's probably people listening who are like, I like guns. I have a Crown Victoria. I bought a backhoe for no reason. And, and maybe that's, something you're, well, all right, probably not that many people listening think that, but I'm saying it's like, if hindsight's 20/20, that's some weird fucking shit right there. That's, you're a pilot, you lie and say you have done missions for the CIA, so you have this grandiose, a lot of people that want to kill also are fascinated with police work. I'm just saying, just putting it out there. I'm not a psychologist. I don't have a degree. I just play one on radio or podcast. So I think he's escalating is the word I'm going to use. I think he's escalating into becoming a weirdo. So he, still is seeing other women the entire time they're married. But Helle, is like, I'm aware of it. Maybe it's because of the kids or finances or just to keep up appearances, because she was very cautious and very private. She took it and took it and took it. She told several of her friends, look, I'm done. I'm done. So in 1986, she retained a divorce attorney. And then this is how smart this woman was. In 1986, she hires a private detective named Keith Mayo. And Keith Mayo, he's a former Connecticut police officer. He knows the shit to get to gather evidence against Richard so she can get a divorce, have custody of the kids, and not have to put up with his bullshit. So she hires him, and the timing is just, oh, Helle, it's perfect, and yet not soon enough. Or it's bad timing is all I have to say about that. So on the evening of November 18th of 1986, and she's in the midst of, filing a divorce and getting information about her present husband. There's a really bad snowstorm that hits central Connecticut, and she is picked up by friends at the airport after coming back from a flight coming in from Germany. She tells Richard that she's filing for divorce, and she knows he's fucking half of the, eastern seaboard. She's never heard from again.
So wait, she's picked up at the airport by friends. Mm-hmm. They take her home.
Yeah.
She tells Richard bye-bye.
Well, she tells him, I'm beginning the proceedings of bye-bye.
Okay. And how do we know that she told him that? Or that she told the friends she was going to say that?
She told her attorney and her friends.
Okay.
And anyone else who would listen, her family.
Got it.
There are letters. Her mother ends up coming from Denmark with letters. She told everyone. She was planning this for a while. So she told everyone except Richard. And then she tells him. Now, timing is everything, right? There's a lot of things when I say we can look back at his weird predilections and his obsessions, it sounds like the building of a serial killer. But this timing is too close for comfort. So she tells him when she arrives home late as her friends pick her up from the airport during this big storm, and she's, we're beginning divorce proceedings. Richard has purchased a large freezer on November 17th.
Oh. For all the big game he goes hunting.
Right.
Yeah.
The 18th is when she's picked up by her friends. That evening of the 18th. On the 19th, Richard Crafts takes their 3 children and his au pair from their house in Newtown to his sister's house in Westport, Connecticut. Now, it's during a big, huge storm. He wakes them up at 6:30. He tells the au pair and the kids, Helle went to my sister's house in Westport. I'm taking you all there. Now, part of that's odd because not only was it a treacherous snowstorm, the electricity was out in Westport. Why would your wife get up in the middle of the night, drive to your sister's house, not hers, your sister's house, and leave her kids and au pair and husband behind? She drove separately, except she didn't. So he takes the kids and the au pair to his sister's house. His sister said he didn't stay long. He basically dropped them off and left. His sister, along with the au pair, are really integral parts of this case and are just amazing women who are loyal to Helle and are really part of his downfall. So he goes back to the house. Helle, of course, isn't there after he gets the kids and the au pair to his sister's house. They're like, well, where's Helle? I don't know. He goes back to his house. He spends the entire day. What do you think he might be doing?
Oh, making a couple of sandwiches, watching the game.
Watching the game in the snow. Perhaps freezing his wife cutting her up and taking her and his rented U-Haul and wood chipper to Lake Zoar and disposing of her.
Oh, God.
So several witnesses saw the truck and the wood chipper in different locations around Newtown and Southbury. So between 3 and 4 a.m. on a bridge in Newtown, a person stops and asks, "Why are you doing this in the middle of a snowstorm?" And he says, "Oh, I'm clearing limbs that came down in that storm on the 18th, 2 days earlier."
What?
No tree limbs were on his property during the storm. So because of this big storm that had started on the 18th, continued through the 19th, it grew worse, and it kind of hung around Newtown. The entire city is sort of blanketed with snow and sleet and a lot of winds, a lot of stuff going on, and the electricity was out. And utility workers are busting their butt. All of these public highway employees were called in, the ones that were even off duty. It's like, look, all hands on deck, emergency. We need you to plow. We need you to lay salt down. We need, all of this stuff taken care of during the night so that people can commute correctly. So for the next few days, all of these utility workers, the snowplows were out en masse, and sanders, and all these utility workers are working double, triple shifts. So one utility worker, Joseph Hine, he arrives at the municipal garage at 11:30 p.m. on the 20th. And he took the sander out and he dropped sand on Route 172, which is one of the major roads in Newtown. So it's about an hour later. It's 12:30. He goes back to the garage and picks up a snowplow. So then he begins plowing the route on Main Street in Southbury. And he does this for a couple of hours, trying to avoid any branches, but pushing the snow off to the side of the roadways and keeping things unblocked. And it's at 3:30 a.m. He plows along a length of something called River Road, and he comes to an intersection at South Flat Hill Road and River Road. So there's all this, snow and sleet are still falling pretty hard. It's really more like January to him as opposed to November. It was a really crappy snowstorm for this time of year. So as he passes the intersection, he sees a U-Haul parked off on the side of the road. He's like, this is like a box van. It's 1 ton with dual wheels. This is what he later tells detective. He's like, the box van was off-white with, it was kind of dirty because of the snow, and the cab had an orange color. So the lights are off, and this truck is off to the side of the road, and the roll-up, the back door is closed. But when Hines gets a little closer, he sees that there's a really large wood chipper attached to the back. And he says the wood chipper looks old and pretty used. And then he passes the U-Haul and he sees there's a man standing near the driver's door who then suddenly began to walk quickly toward the rear of the truck. And the man motioned for him to pass him. And he was like, okay. And he continues down River Road and he passes him. 2 hours later, at 5:30 a.m., Joseph Hine is plowing River Road coming in the opposite direction. And he passes that Glen Road area and he sees the same U-Haul with the wood chipper. And he says, this time I didn't see anyone around the truck or the wood chipper. But as he passed it, he notices that the back of the box truck is open and there's some wood chips inside. And he also sees there's wood chips on the shoulder of the road. And he just continues to plow and watches the U-Haul, disappear from his rearview mirror. And he's like, it just seems strange. Why would anyone be out early in the morning in the middle of a storm chipping wood? So it's now December 1st, and no one knows where Helle is. And every time he is asked, Richard gives a different story. She had a flight. She's in Costa Rica with her friend Helen. She went to Denmark to visit her mother. There's just different stories all the time.
See, I got to pause here for a moment because this is a thing that I never understand about so many of these people that kill their spouse or whatever, and they give a different story every time. Don't they realize the basic thing you have to do is have a story and stick to it? I never understand this.
Well, thanks, Ted Bundy. Why don't you tell everyone how to commit a murder correctly?
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm with you. This is the 80s. You know, people weren't as, hip and up to... I feel like so many people went missing because you could ask someone, where's your wife? Oh, she went to XYZ. 2 weeks later, oh, where's your wife? Oh, she went to PDQ. I mean, I keep going back to, again, Cohen Brothers film, to the scene in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou with, Mrs. Hogwallop, RUNNOFT. So, yeah, I feel like you can say, oh, she ran off with a dude or whatever. And they would believe you to a certain extent. And then other people would dig around and be like, no, she wouldn't leave her kids. What are you talking about, you fuckface? You were the one who was cheating. But for a while, you can get away with stuff. You could get away with stuff. And by the time people figured out you were lying, valuable evidence is probably lost. Nowadays, you cannot go to the bathroom without Alexa saying, did you wipe?
Right.
I mean, you can't, there's nothing.
Right. Yeah.
You can't do nothing. I'm an English major. You can't do no thing without somebody knowing now. But 1986, he fucked up. The thing is, Helle was so brilliant and Richard was so not. That's why I'm giving him some sort of credit for, Edward Scissorhands, sex fingers or something. I don't know what attracted her, but it weren't his brain. It's not his brain. So it's now December 1st. And the Newtown Police Department gets this call from, ex-Connecticut State Police officer and current private eye, Keith Mayo. And he's like, look, Helle Crafts was leaving her husband. And I haven't heard from her in a while. And her husband is not a good man. And I think she may have been murdered. And he's adamant that the Newtown police take a look at this. And they're like, we know him. I mean, he was an auxiliary officer in 1982. Sure, he has enough guns for 50 men and buys a cop car that's not a cop car and buys his own antennas. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
Wow.
I mean, he took his position really seriously.
He was really cute about that. We thought he was adorable.
Perhaps. So her car is later found in the employee parking lot at Pan Am Airlines in Kennedy Airport. And it's like, no. So he's told some people in his family that she was on her way to his sister's house in Westport, never showed up. He's told some people she's on a vacation in Costa Rica with her friend Helen. He's told some people she is visiting her mother in Denmark. I mean, it's like she is, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? I mean, she's everywhere. So the police are really not expressing a lot of concern over her disappearance because, people walk away from their lives. He was an asshole. He hit her. And it's like, you know what? She wouldn't have left her kids. She would not have left her kids.
Right.
So friends of the Craft family, neighbors, Helle's co-workers, they all get together and go to the Newtown police station and say, you need to look at this more closely. She would never have left her 3 kids. Her husband is a fucking cheat freak. And, she found out that he had a full-time girlfriend in New Jersey and had been seeing her for years. And she is collecting information to divorce him sooner rather than later. So, the police are like, all right, I guess we have to bring him in because he's kind of giving different, accounts of what's happening. It's like, So then they finally decide, I guess, to really nail him down as far as a timeline when her friend Lena Johansson goes to the police and says, look, she told me in early November of 1986, if anything happens to me, it's not an accident. I mean,
that's pretty strong.
That's pretty big, right? I mean, that's pretty big. So they bring him in finally on December 11th. It's now December 11th. So they find him, ironically, Richard Crafts is on duty at his Southbury Police Department job, working the night shift for $7 an hour.
Solving crime.
Yeah, or committing them. So the Newtown detectives call the Southbury police and say, hey, can you send over Officer Crafts for some questioning? So he's in his full uniform, and he arrives at 9:20. And he's just as cold and ridiculous as he always is, I guess. So Lieutenant DeJoseph and Detective Vardzik have some questions for him. So, Richard, did you know that your wife had hired a private investigator? No. Did you know the private investigator has documented your relationship with the woman in New Jersey? No. Why would your wife tell her friends she was afraid for herself regarding, you being served your divorce papers and then tell them if something happened, they really needed to check it out? I can't imagine her saying this. That's very out of character for her.
So far, he's been a pretty cool cucumber.
Oh, he's the coolest of cucumbers. On November 18th, when Helle came home, when and why did she leave? Oh, those answers are in my original statement. What's the story with your bedroom rug? Apparently you removed it or cut some pieces out. Can you explain that to me? All the rugs in the house are being removed and replaced.
Wow. Wow.
What was spilled on the rug in your bedroom? Kerosene. Did you cut the pieces out of the rug? Yes. 2 feet at a time. It's easier to remove that way.
All right.
What did you do with the rug you took out of the bedroom? I dumped it in the Newtown landfill a week ago. It's blue.
He's doing a good job so far.
Mm-hmm. Why have you been telling different stories about Helle being gone, like that her mother's sick? Well, I didn't want to say my wife was gone because I don't know where she is.
Okay, now it sounds like he has planned all of these answers to these questions.
Has Helle received any mail since she's been missing? No. She's gotten no letters since she left, and she usually gets about 2 letters a week. Every single question they ask, he has an answer for. He's cooperative, but guarded, and everything he says can't really be considered an outright lie. So he tells some half-truths, I guess, to make it look, plausible, but he's just very apathetic. So he provides, the investigators with a 1-page statement, and it's pretty unhelpful. But so they're becoming, a little more convinced, where the hell is Helle Nielsen Crafts, and what does Richard Crafts have to do with it? So Keith Mayo, the investigator, is just really not happy. And he's like, look, I need you guys to really take a look at this. So this man decides Newtown police are not taking it seriously enough. He goes to the Newtown dump and spends days looking through garbage.
Oh my God.
To find the pieces of carpeting that Richard Crafts has cut out of the bedroom. He did get a few helpers, and for days he's digging through all this trash in the freezing cold, and there, it's like this endless stream of garbage. And, it's later reported everyone's like gagging in their throat and cursing.
Thank God it was in wintertime and
I
not
know.
in the summertime.
I guess that does make it an eensy bit better. But they actually find a piece of the rug. They find a piece of the rug from the bedroom. And they say it looks like it has human blood on it. So it's taken to the state police laboratory in Meriden. And this is where my beloved Dr. Henry Lee comes into play. This case has a lot going for it. It's a very storied case. There's just a lot that comes out of this case and makes it an even bigger case in the history of criminal investigation and forensics. So Henry Lee is, looking at it for better or worse, whatever you think, especially after the staircase. If you didn't like what he said, he's still, is smart enough to know his shit. So the police are still saying, it's a missing persons case. It's still a missing persons case. But the PI, Keith Mayo, was like, I do not think she disappeared on her own accord. And I'm disappointed in the Newtown police because they're going after this very piecemeal. So he's trying to put pressure on them to really investigate this, more closely instead of sort of taking Richard Kraft's, cold word for it. So the Newtown police are kind of being criticized by the press, by the private eye, by Helle's friends and family, and they want the state's attorney's office to take jurisdiction and take it and hand it to the state police. So there's a little bit of a setback when Dr. Lee reports his findings. The rug, doesn't contain any positive tests for blood. The rug is just a stained rug. So Helle's friends are still keeping pressure on them that, look, this has to be handled in a different way. You're not looking at this close enough. The Western District Major Crimes Unit assigned some detectives to look deeper into Richard Kraft's activities right before Helle's disappearance. So they pull his credit card purchases, his phone records, which in the 80s, very rare thing to do. They didn't do that then unless they were really, stumped as to try and figure out who did what. And I'm sure it's a very different kind of thing than getting a subpoena from Verizon to subpoena someone's phone records. Now, it was probably a much bigger deal. But they did find these interesting purchases. They found the large capacity Westinghouse freezer that he'd purchased at a store in Danbury, and he paid $375 for it and picked it up on November 17th, which is the day before Helle came home and went missing.
Yeah.
They also noticed that he rented some type of machinery from Darien Rentals, and that was a $900 purchase on his then called MasterCard. So they're like, why does he need this giant freezer? And what is this giant piece of machinery that he rented? We don't know what it is, but it's a big piece of machinery for $900. So when you're in law enforcement, every day is a work day. So Christmas Day of 1986, finally, the Newtown police get a search warrant for Richard Kraft's home on Newfield Lane. And it's a fascinating 11-page affidavit. So, it's like, we need to look for this. We're going to look for this. We don't know what happened here. There's probable cause. It's a fascinating 11-page affidavit if you ever want to look into it. So the Detective Cortero says the affidavit shows probable cause to believe, and we do believe, that there's evidence of murder, and it will be found within and upon the premises of 5 Newfield Lane. So they conduct a search of the home. They find out that Richard has taken the kids and is out of town in Florida and for the holidays. And they're like, this is it. This is the time. So they get in through a back window. They have the search warrant. And Dr. Henry Lee agrees on Christmas Day to be present and oversee all of the collection of the evidence to make sure it's done correctly.
Well, that's impressive.
It's very impressive to me. So they get in, through the back window. The house is in complete disarray. There's furniture everywhere. There's clothes everywhere. There's unwashed dishes. There's mattresses that are like in the living room floor. It's, all the carpets already pulled up and discarded. They did find a freezer, but it was an older one and there's no body in it. What they didn't realize was that the freezer they were, looking for, he had already disposed of. He had purchased it, used it to freeze his wife, removed it, and then discarded it.
And you freeze it so that it's easier to cut up in the wood chipper?
Yep.
Is that okay? I got it.
Yep. That's it.
That's not gross at all.
I'm worried that you know that.
Took me a minute to figure out why did he need the freezer, but then,
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be a lot more sloppy.
Okay, producer Mark. Yes, it would be sloppy. So they seize 108 pieces of evidence in this search warrant inventory. They, find these amazing amounts of guns, pistols, and shotguns, and clips, and ammunition, and like a real arsenal. I mean, it's sort of crazy. But they also took like towels, washcloths, the mattress, and the bedding from the bed. And Dr. Lee performed a luminol test. Now, remember, we're talking, 1986. And various locations throughout the house tested positive for the presence of blood. So, they're looking for any sort of evidence of someone attempting to dispose of a corpse. Now, Dr. Lee ended up writing a book later on called Cracking Cases. And he absolutely uses this case as an example because there's so much coming from his position. There's so much, and there's so much for the rest of us too. It's just so frightening what ends up being left. So some of the towels that were seized were tested later and positive for blood and type O blood, which is Helle's. And, all of these weapons are taken, but they're still like, what happened? Did he shoot her? Where is she? So the week after Christmas, between Christmas and December 30th, things pick up pretty quickly. They learn that the $900 charge on Richard Kraft's MasterCard at Darien Rentals was payment for a wood chipper. He picked up a very large wood chipper he had rented. The model is called the Brush Bandit. Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
I know. On November 19th. So now they're like, oh, no.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah, they're saying, okay, charge for freezer, charge for...
Right. So in the meantime, the wonderful utility worker Joseph Hine says, look, I just need to tell somebody. I'm plowing snow on River Road. There's a wood chipper and a U-Haul and a dude, and they take him and he shows them the exact place just outside of Southbury where he observed the truck with the wood chipper.
Did he just go to the police and just say, hey, I got to get something off my chest?
Well, I think what happened was on December 30th, they release in the press, oh, Richard Crafts bought a freezer we can't find for $375, a Westinghouse freezer nowhere on his property. Did he gift a freezer to someone for Christmas in November? And he also spent $900 renting a wood chipper.
So it was out in the
ding,
press.
ding, ding.
Okay.
Yeah, I think then Mr. Hines is like, oh, shit. So he takes them on December 30th, takes them to the exact part of the bank of Lake Zoar. And they observe wood chips. Some of them are small. There's also some green plastic kind of substance that's thrown in with the chips. A detective gets down on his hands and knees. It's pretty cold at this time of year, but he sees some scraps of shredded paper, and he finds a few pieces of mail. And there's, those little plastic cellophane windows,
Right. Yeah.
over a, in an envelope over an address.
Right.
Miss Helle Nielsen Crafts, 5 Newfield Lane, Newtown, Connecticut. And he screams, "There's something wrong here." Within an hour, there's a search team that is all over the scene, and they are blocking off the entire perimeter. They search every inch of the ground. There's several envelopes of mail with Helle's name they find within 1 hour. They also find strands of blonde hair, bone fragments, cloth, plastic, wood chips, and lots of things that are unidentified.
Oh, God.
Every single thing they find, they collect. It doesn't matter how small, and they take it back to the state police forensic lab in Meriden. And Dr. Lee says, "I knew from my past experience we would have to prove beyond any reasonable doubt that those small remains were those of Helle Crafts and that she was murdered. Otherwise, there's been no homicide, and thus Richard Crafts would not be charged." And this is the first case in Connecticut history that there is a conviction, and technically, it's a no-body case. Technically. But what they found, it's so difficult to describe what they found, because it's just so awful. I mean, it's got to be considered a no-body case because literally 3 ounces of her human tissue are found.
Oh, God.
A portion of her finger, a fingernail, a portion of a toenail, 2,660 strands of blonde hair, 69 slivers of bone,
Oh, God.
5 drops of blood, 2 teeth, a truncated piece of human skull.
Oh.
Yeah.
I
know. I'm sorry. But it's just, I should have just said it's a no-body case, but you have to know there is proof that her body was there and what he did to it. It's awful. So in the meantime, the private eye has gone through all of the information that Helle has given him. One of the things turns out to be a receipt for the chainsaw. So he bought a Stihl chainsaw, and it's nowhere in the house. And she had provided a receipt, a credit card receipt for the private eye, and he turns it over to the police. And then in that area, police divers locate the Stihl chainsaw embedded in the bottom of the river. He had one piece of intelligence in him. He filed the serial number off of the chainsaw, but they can tell it's only been in the water a short time. So they're like, all right, we have to keep looking. So they keep looking, and they find, another part of a toe. I mean, it's just terrible. But
it's horrible.
It's terrible. So with all of these pieces of information now, and I hate to even use the word pieces, all of this information that they have gathered, they now go and get an arrest warrant on January 11th. So he is, they go to his house in Newtown, and they call him. It's 9 p.m., and there's like a dozen Connecticut state troopers and detectives around 5 Newfield Lane, and they surround the house, and they call him, and they order him out. It's 9 o'clock, and he says, "I'm tired, I'll take care of it in the morning," and hangs up.
I'm sorry. This is one cold motherfucker.
He's a fascinating narcissist. I hate to say it. I really hate to say it. And he's still alive. Pile of shit. 80 years old, fucking pile of shit. So the police call him back and demand that he surrenders. And he's like, don't call me back, and hangs up on them.
Oh my God. I'm going to call the cops if you keep calling me.
I'm going to call you back and tell you to yell at yourself if you don't stop calling me. So finally around 12:30 a.m., it's like a 3-hour standoff. He finally says to the cops, look, my kids are sleeping. Fine, I'll be out in 5 minutes. So he, distraught, disheveled, he comes out. He is arrested and arraigned in a Danbury court, and he is given a bail of $750,000. So what the police, they don't really know what happened, except that she comes home. They feel like the part of the carpet that was cut out, that she was at the end of the bed, either changing the sheets or making the bed. And they feel like he bludgeoned her from behind at the foot of the bed sometime, early on November 19th, when she had gotten home late on the night of the 18th from her flight from Germany. He had all the guns, but maybe didn't want to wake up the au pair and the kids, so he just bludgeons her. He places her inside the freezer that he had bought, the day before, which, lends itself to premeditation. He, lets her freeze for a couple of hours. Then he wakes up the au pair and the kids and takes them to Westport during the middle of a storm. And then sometime during that day, the police surmise that he took her body, which was frozen, and he owned another piece of property in Newtown. He took her there, took the Stihl chainsaw to a piece of property he owned in Newtown, a secluded piece of property with nothing on it. He cut her body into smaller parcels, took them back to the freezer, and then the next day, on the 20th in the early morning, it's dark, he takes the packages of his wife, and the green plastic material is, at that time, garbage bags. He had taken his wife in pieces in garbage bags to Lake Zoar, and then ran her through the wood chipper. So, because of what Joseph Hine saw with the U-Haul, the wood chipper, that's where he did his horrible, gruesome work.
Yeah.
And then he went and got some wood. That's where the wood chips come from. And ran it through the chipper in an effort to clean it.
To clean it from the blood and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what he didn't know is that, the machine pushed pieces of his wife into the river, and some parts didn't make it to the water. There were, these fragments of her bone and her hair and her teeth and her nails and her mail that were on the banks of the lake.
That's an interesting thing. Why did he include her mail?
They believe that it was in her pocket.
Oh, I see.
It was folded up and in her pocket when he put her through the wood chipper. So even though I thought this story was from the minds of the Cohen brothers, it turns out there is a lot of information on it. It was actually the very first episode of Forensic Files. Her case was the very first episode of Forensic Files. I found really great information in the Arizona Sun, which I looked at first for Connecticut newspapers. I was wrong. There wasn't a lot. There was wonderful information in the New York Times. There were several TV shows that covered it. It's very fascinating. So I guess one of the more damning pieces of information or evidence is that they found that chainsaw on the bottom of the lake. And they actually, they had this receipt that he had purchased it, and there was no, chainsaw at their house at all.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely nothing at their house, that all the things he had purchased. So the thing that really proved conclusively that this was Helle was forensic odontology. There was a small specimen, of teeth. There was a lot of, bone fragments from her jawbone, but there was a forensic odontologist that proved that the bridge that was attached to one of the teeth could be traced back to her, and that there was traumatic force that sheared off this part of the jaw and tooth, and a tooth was still attached with some of the jawbone in it. And he says this fracture occurred by blunt force that fractured it to the center line and took part of the jawbone with it. So the second tooth specimen was, even more interesting to this forensic odontologist because there was still part of the metal crown. And he went through hundreds of x-rays and, all different angles. And he used 5 sets of x-rays that were taken of Helle Crafts' teeth between 80 and 86. And he really did this painstaking comparison between the tooth that was found and her teeth. And he said it was medically absolutely certain that this was her lower left bicuspid.
Well, that's what they needed to convict, because otherwise I would say the defense could say, without DNA, I mean, they could have said all kinds of stuff, but it sounds like the odontology stuff was conclusive.
Hold on to your hat.
Uh-oh.
So the prosecution even backs up this forensic odontologist with another odontologist, and he is a forensic scientist from the New York State Police, and he is Dr. Lowell Levine, and he had helped identify the remains of Dr. Joseph Mingala in 1985, and he had also confirmed for the U.S. Congress that the body buried in the Washington Memorial was, in fact, President John Kennedy. And Dr. Lowell Levine agreed with the original forensic odontologist, Dr. Zerakoulis, that the all-important tooth with the attached crown, that tooth, that lower left second bicuspid, and he was very dramatic in his description, belonged to no one other than Helle Crafts when she was alive. So that was a pretty big blow to the defense. However, it goes to the jury on June 23rd. And for 2 weeks, 9 men and 3 women tried to reach a verdict. But one man was stubborn and was unable to really interpret the evidence. He exasperated the rest of the jury, and he held out for a not guilty verdict. One of the other jurors said it was like reasoning with a child, and he had a real difficulty retaining information. One juror said this wasn't chaos, it was hell. So the other jurors tried in vain to convince him, this lone holdout, and in the end, he refused to participate and walked out of court on July 15th.
Wow, oh my God.
After 100 witnesses, 650 exhibits were presented, and a 53-day trial, a mistrial had to be declared.
Oh, for God's sake.
So it was a pretty bitter disappointment for the family, the friends, the investigators. I mean, it was really shitty. They'd worked on this case, diligently since December. They should have started in November, but diligently since December of 1986. So there's a new trial that's quickly agreed upon, and there's so much evidence and so much publicity, they decide to change the venue to Norwalk, Connecticut. So on September 7th of 1989, the second trial of Richard Crafts opens, even though it's under a big cloud of controversy because of, all of the media attention. The prosecutors are, wondering if they're going to get a conviction in something that's really like a nobody case, even though it's just terrible. It's a nobody case, but there's a part of the body. That's the part that is this heartbreaking. So the second trial, just they present everything almost like the first trial. Same witnesses, same evidence. Richard Crafts just has this very detached way of, appearing. He, it's like in his head, they said he looked like he was preoccupied with other things, which makes sense for a narcissist, probably just thinking about himself or how he's going to look in stripes, And And they bring back Dr. Lee. And when the case finally goes to the jury on November 20th, it only took 8 hours to reach a unanimous verdict. He's found guilty beyond any question, 11 men and 1 woman. Richard Crafts could not ask for a more fair jury, is what one of the jurors said. I know this sounds corny, but the system works. Well, I guess in this time it works. He showed, no emotion. The verdict is announced, guilty. It's the totality of the evidence is overwhelming, is what one of the jurors said. So on the 21st of November, the verdict is announced, and it's almost 3 years to the day when she was murdered, because she was probably murdered on November 20th, the late night 19th or the 20th. So in January of 1990, he's unrepentant, defiant asshole Richard Crafts. He's sentenced to 50 years in prison. 50 years in prison. He's now 79 or 80. I guess he'll be 80 this year. And he is up for parole in 2021.
Oh, you're kidding.
I am not.
Wow.
I am not. Again, I thought this case was all from the mind of the Cohens, and it's based on reality. What one would do to someone else, I'm still always amazed. And what someone does when someone wants to divorce you, I don't, divorce is an option. It's absolutely an option. So I hope you remember that and more cowbell.
And remember, if you've got a tip for Melissa, give her a call at 832-TIPSTER or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. And subscribe, rate, review the podcast at Apple Music or wherever you find podcasts. And don't forget to become a patron of the podcast by going to patreon.com/justthetipsters. See you next time.